50-year-old woman. I am proud of every year and every wrinkle. And look at all of your faces. The face of leadership. The face of leadership in our party, the party of women's suffrage. The face of leadership in your communities, in your businesses, in your places of work and worship. Ladies, note to Democrat Party. We are not a special interest group. We are the majority of the nation. Our experiences, our views, our hopes, our dreams, our desires are as diverse as the other half of the nation, the men. And I personally am so tired of hearing about women's issues. Every issue is a woman's issue. We care about healthcare, we care about national security, about education, about debts and deficits. Yes, we care about the character of our nation. We care about defunding Planned Parenthood. We care about it all. And yet, we know change is difficult, change is slow. And we know that it is still different for women. We know that the burdens of poverty still rest more heavily on women. The responsibilities of parenthood rest more heavily on women. We know that we do not have meritocracies everywhere. And yet, this is a time in our nation's history where it must be true that every man and every woman has an opportunity to fulfill their potential. That is why I am running for the presidency of the United States. I have traveled and lived and worked all over the world. And I know with certainty that it is only in this nation that a young woman can begin her career typing and filing and answering the phones for a 9-person real estate firm. Go on eventually to lead what we turned into the largest technology company in the world and run for the presidency of the United States. That is only possible in this nation. Here because our founders knew something that my mother taught me many, many years ago when I was a little girl. One Sunday morning, my mother said to me in Sunday school, "What you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God." And I have learned all throughout my life that everyone has God-given gifts, that everyone has potential, but this nation became a nation where more things have been more possible for more people from more places because our founders built a nation on a visionary idea. And the visionary idea was this, that here you had a right to find and use your God-given gifts. You have a right to fulfill your potential. That is what they meant when they said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they said, and this was the radical part, they said that that right to find and use your God-given gifts to fulfill your potential, that right comes from God and cannot be taken away by man. Ladies and gentlemen, I am running for the presidency of the United States because we have reached a pivotal point in our nation's history. The potential of too many Americans, men and women, indeed the potential of this great nation, is being crushed by the weight, the power, the cost, the complexity, the ineptitude and the corruption of the federal government and a political class that is unwilling or unable to do anything about it. party and a leader of this nation who is not afraid to challenge the status quo. How do you go from secretary to CEO? By challenging the status quo, by solving problems, by producing results, and by leading. All of you have done the same in your lives or you would not be here. And we know as women that sometimes we face special hurdles, special barriers. I can remember my very first business meeting after I got out of the secretarial pool. And I went off to work at AT&T where I met my husband Frank 34 years ago. My very first business meeting with a colleague to meet some key clients. He came up to my desk and he said, well, Carly, I guess you can't come to this meeting because the customer wants to go to something ironically called the boardroom. I said, well, why can't I go? He said, well, it's a strip club. I thought long and hard about that. And that a couple hours later, I went back to him and I said, well, I hope you won't feel too uncomfortable, but I'll see you at the boardroom. In my most severe suit. I had a little bow tie, remember those? I got in the cab, I gave him the name and the address of the strip club, and he turned around and said, oh, you the new act? I can remember the first time I became a manager, and my new boss introduced me to my new subordinates by saying, this is Carly, she's our token bimbo. So yes, ladies, I know sometimes change is difficult, change is slow, but I also know that when you have a leader unafraid to challenge the status quo, that change is coming. You know, there's a big difference between managers and leaders. It's not that managers are bad people, they're not. But managers are people who operate within the system. They tinker around the edges of problems. They don't ever really challenge the status quo. They just operate within it. We got lots of managers in life, in business, and in politics. Leaders challenge the status quo and produce results. I am reminded of something a great hero of mine once said. Margaret Thatcher once addressed her fellow countrymen and women at a pivotal point in that nation's history, and she said, I am not content to manage the decline of a great nation. Well, ladies, neither am I, but I am prepared. With your votes, with your support, with your prayers, I am prepared to lead the resurgence of a great nation. Whatever your issue, whatever your cause, whatever festering problem you hope would have been resolved by now by the professional political class, they have failed us. A lot of us worked really hard to return Republican majorities to the House and to return a majority to the Senate. And yet, we haven't passed the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. We have not defunded Planned Parenthood. We haven't passed a border security bill. Just last month, we got a report that 307,000 veterans have died waiting for an appointment, and not a single head has rolled in Washington, D.C. Under both Democrats and Republicans alike, let us be honest. Under both Democrats and Republicans alike, government has gotten bigger and bigger, more and more powerful, complicated, and complex. We have talked about problems for decades. This election cycle, what a surprise, we're talking once again about Illegal immigration. How often do we talk about it? How long has the border been insecure? 25 years. It is time to quit talking about it and secure the border. San Francisco has been a sanctuary city since 1989. There are now 300 of them in this country. Are we going to talk about it, or are we going to elect a leader who's going to do something about it? Every government agency under both Republicans and Democrats alike has gotten bigger and bigger, and while we always talk about reducing the size of government, limiting its power and scope, we still have a 73,000-page tax code, a regulatory thicket that is impenetrable, and that weight, that complexity is crushing this nation. We are now destroying more businesses than we are creating for the first time in U.S. history. And it is not the big getting destroyed. It is the small, the community-based, the family-owned businesses that create 2/3 of the new jobs in this country and employ half the people. This crushing load of government is tangling people's lives up in webs of dependence. 75% of the American people now think the federal government is corrupt. 82% of the American people now think we have a professional political class that is so focused with the preservation of its own power, privilege, and position that it has forgotten who it is there to serve. At this pivotal point in our nation's history, we need to get this economy going and growing again, and we can only do that by recognizing who creates the jobs in this country: small, family-owned, community-based businesses. We have to disentangle people's lives from those webs of dependence. We have to cut a 73,000-page tax code down to about 3. We have to hack through the regulatory thicket. Yes, 3, ladies and gentlemen. So you don't need an accountant or a lawyer or a lobbyist to understand it. And we have to cut this bureaucracy down to size and hold it accountable. And that will take a lot of challenging of the status quo. It means we have to go to some version of zero-based budgeting. We actually do need to know where our money is being spent. That's the only way you can spend less overall and yet prioritize how you spend it. We need to go to some version of a meritocracy so that when hundreds of thousands of veterans die without an appointment, more than 2 people in the VA lose their jobs. We have 256,000 federal government bureaucrats, baby boomers, who are going to retire in the next 4 or 5 years. I will not replace a single one. Leadership in the world, ladies and gentlemen, because when this nation does not lead, the world is a very dangerous and a very tragic place. We must have the strongest military on the face of the planet, and everyone has to know it. Which is why we must serve those who have already served us. And on day 1 in the Oval Office, I will make 2 phone calls on day 1. The first will be to my good friend Bibi Netanyahu to reassure him we will stand with the state of Israel always. The second phone call will be to the Supreme Leader of Iran. He might not take my phone call, but he will get my message. And the message is this: New Deal. I don't care what deal you signed with President Obama and John Kerry. New Deal. Until and unless you open every nuclear, every military facility to real, anytime, anywhere inspections by our people, not yours, we, the United States of America, will make it as difficult as possible for you to move money around the global financial system. We can do it, we don't need anyone's permission to do it. And with those 2 phone calls, loud and clear, the United States of America is back in the leadership business. We must win this job. We cannot lose again. So we need someone who can win this job. And I think you have seen by now, I will not shrink from a fight. I will not falter. But I will also talk to anyone. I will answer any question. I will go anywhere. Because the only way we can win this election is to talk to the American people about our party, our ideals. I was asked on The View, look, we gotta go talk to those people who don't yet know they agree with us. And so I went to The View and I was asked a question on The View by one of their lovely hosts. I had quite a good time. We were all having a good time. And she said to me, Rosie Perez, she said, you know, Carly, I really like you. I'm not a Republican. I said, I'm shocked. Why are you? And I said, because I know no one of us is any better than any other one of us. Every one of us has God-given gifts. Every one of us has potential. Every one of us has the capacity to live a life of dignity and purpose and meaning. And I know our values, our principles, and our policies work better to lift everyone up. Must have in 2016. I was asked an interesting question early on in my candidacy. I was asked whether or not, it was on a Saturday morning, a national television show, I was asked whether or not I thought a woman's hormones prevented her from serving in the Oval Office. Really? So ladies, let's just think. Can we think of a single instance in which a man's judgment was clouded by his hormones?
Yeah, I would say. I almost stood up.
I am not asking for your vote and your support because I am a woman. I am asking for your vote and your support because I am the most qualified candidate to win this job and to do this job. And while winning is important, doing is even more important. At this pivotal time, doing is even more important. These festering problems that we have left unsolved for decade after decade, the insecurity of our borders, the debts and deficits, a federal government that no longer serves. You name your problem, they have festered for too long. So let me close by asking you to think about what it takes to actually do this job, to get the economy going and growing again, to lead in the world, to cut this government down to size and remind it who it is there to serve.
Thank you.
It takes someone who actually understands how the economy works. Our president must understand how the world works and who's in it. I have met more world leaders on the stage today than anyone running, with the possible exception of Hillary Clinton, but I didn't do photo ops, I did business and charity and policy. The advisory board at the CIA and advised the head of the CIA, the NSA, 2 secretaries of defense, a secretary of state, and a secretary of homeland security. I understand the world and who is in it, and I respect our military men and women. Our president must understand bureaucracies and how they operate, and how to cut them down to size. She must understand technology. It is a great tool. It is a powerful weapon. And no, Mrs. Clinton, you do not wipe a server with a towel.
Thank you.
is. Leadership is not about position. It is not about title. It is not about how big your office is, or how big your plane, or your helicopter, or your ego. Leadership is about service. Leadership is about service. The highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others, and now we need a leader in the Oval Office who understands they must serve by unlocking the potential of this great nation. And so, I will leave you with this. I think we know what this nation can be. I think we know what this nation must be. And that vision of what we can and must be is symbolized by two of the most powerful symbols of our nation's democracy: Lady Liberty and Lady Justice. Picture in your minds Lady Liberty. She stands tall and strong, as America must always be. She is clear-eyed and resolute. She doesn't shield her eyes from the realities of the world, but she nevertheless looks out into the world, as America always must, and she waves her torch high, because she knows she is a beacon of hope in a very troubled world. And Lady Justice. Lady Justice holds a sword by one side because she is a fighter. She is a warrior for the values and the principles that have made this nation great. She holds a scale in the other hand, and with that scale she says, all of us are equal in the eyes of God, and so all of us must be equal in the eyes of the law and government, powerful and powerless alike. And she wears a blindfold. And with that blindfold, I think she tells us that it must be true, it can be true, that in this nation, in this century, it does not matter what you look like. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter how you start. It does not matter your circumstances. Here in this nation, every American's life must be filled with the possibilities that come from their God-given gifts. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so very much.